A millionaire goes undercover as a chauffeur and uncovers that his fiancée is merely a pawn in a larger scheme. The rain poured down, turning the winding Catskill Mountains road into a treacherous watery mirror. The rhythmic swish of the windshield wipers was almost hypnotic, but John Murray, hidden in his chauffeur's uniform, remained acutely focused. Every nerve was alight, concentrating on navigating the raging storm, while the weight of his true mission pressed against his chest like an invisible anchor. Behind him in the plush back seat, William and Vivian Whitmore spoke in hushed tones, yet every word reached John. The couple embodied arrogance, their rigid postures suggesting a lifetime of looking down on others, even when confined in a car during a threatening storm. "It's simply unbelievable," William grumbled, adjusting the cashmere scarf around his neck. "Amber insists on squandering her time with this charity nonsense, as if that's fitting for a woman of her standing. It's almost a disgrace." "Almost," Vivian retorted, raising a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. She held a crystal goblet of red wine, which trembled slightly with the car's bumps. "It's utterly shameful. She has every chance to redeem our family name, yet she prefers to mingle with them." The last word dripped with contempt, barely worth the effort of being spoken. John's jaw tightened, but his eyes stayed fixed on the road. He knew he had to listen to endure. It was the only way to confirm what he'd suspected for weeks. "Did you see how excited she was about that event last week?" Vivian continued, claiming she wants to open a community school, as if she has any idea how to manage such a thing. "If she marries the right man, she'll never need to worry about these ridiculous projects again." William nodded, turning to gaze at the rain-slicked landscape. "That's true, and that's why we must ensure this wedding happens. A man like John Murray doesn't come along twice in a woman's life. He's our ticket back to relevance. An expensive ticket, but an essential one." John's heart pounded. He knew the Whitmores were in financial trouble. It was a rumor that had prompted his undercover operation. But hearing them confirm they saw Amber as merely a pawn in their game sparked a wave of indignation. Amber was anything but that. Strong, generous, independent. They didn't deserve her. A flash of lightning illuminated a dangerous curve ahead, flanked by tall, ominous trees. John expertly adjusted the steering wheel, preventing a skid. The storm's intensity seemed to mirror the rising tension within the car. "You should drive more carefully," Vivian snapped, giving him a cold look in the rearview mirror. "We certainly don't want to arrive at our own party drenched or worse, dead." "Yes, ma'am," John replied, keeping his voice neutral. He knew every word he spoke had to be carefully controlled, lest his true feelings spill out. He also knew his mission was working. They completely bought his disguise. "I hope the heating in the house is fixed," William added. "I don't want guests complaining about the cold." He turned to Vivian, completely ignoring John. "This party must be a success. If we don't demonstrate that we're still a relevant social force, we'll lose what little respect we have left." "Don't worry," Vivian said, taking a long sip of wine. "Everything will be perfect. Once this marriage is secure, all our worries will vanish." Again John felt his anger surge. They spoke of marriage as a transaction, a strategy to regain social standing, with no thought for Amber's feelings or the possibility she might genuinely fall in love with him. A sudden rustling interrupted his thoughts. The wind howled, mixing with the sharp crack of branches dragging across the road. John spotted something dark on the asphalt ahead and slammed on the brake, gripping the steering wheel tight. The car skidded slightly before stabilizing, sending the Whitmores clinging to their seat supports. "What the hell was that?" William roared, eyes wide. "Are you trying to kill us, you incompetent fool?" "Apologies, sir," John responded calmly, suppressing his irritation. "The road is hazardous due to the storm. There was a branch, but I managed to avoid it." "Well, next time pay more attention," Vivian huffed. "We expect impeccable service, not a horror show." John took a deep breath, refocusing on the road. Each minute in the car was a test of his patience, but he had to endure. He was so close to the truth, and nothing would make him give up now. The Whitmore mansion loomed on the horizon, its imposing silhouette stark against the dark, stormy sky. Lights shone in the windows, but to John, the place seemed more like a fortress of hypocrisy than a home. He knew the night was just beginning, and within those walls more truth would surely be revealed. As he parked at the main entrance, he glanced once more in the rearview mirror. William and Vivian were busy adjusting their clothes, ensuring they looked flawless for the arriving guests. They had no idea their chauffeur was actually the man they hoped to manipulate. John switched off the engine and stepped out to open their doors. As the couple emerged, shielded by the umbrellas he quickly offered, he looked up at the sky, letting the rain hit his face for a moment. He needed that split second to compose himself. The game had just begun. 6 months before that tumultuous night, John Murray couldn't have imagined driving a luxury car disguised as a chauffeur, all to expose the truth about the family of the woman he loved. His world then was entirely different, driven by achievement, hard work, and a reputation built on relentless effort. John grew up in Albany, New York, in a small suburban home where every penny counted and every meal was earned through sweat. His mother worked exhausting shifts as a nurse, while his father, a mechanic, spent his days fixing cars in the family garage. John learned early that life was tough, but determination could conquer almost anything. From a young age, he inherited his father's love of engines, spending hours dismantling and reassembling old parts. This mechanical fascination soon blossomed into a passion for innovation. While other teenagers partied, John spent his evenings designing prototypes and studying engineering. At 20, he founded his first startup, focusing on sustainable automotive technologies. Now at 34, John was a billionaire, his name often gracing the headlines of business magazines, where he was hailed as a visionary. Yet, he never lost his humility. Despite having everything money could buy, John still drove his own cars and made a point of treating every employee as an equal. It was at one of those rare social occasions, a charity gala in Manhattan, that John met Amber Whitmore. He'd attended begrudgingly, persuaded by a longtime friend who emphasized the importance of networking. John always loathed these events, superficial encounters filled with fake smiles and talk of exorbitant fortunes. But Amber was different. She stood in a discreet corner, genuinely absorbed in a piece of art, while others circulated with champagne flutes and rehearsed laughter. She wore a simple navy blue dress, free of the typical extravagance John associated with the elite. When he approached her, he was struck by the sincerity in her voice. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" she said, gesturing to the abstract painting. "People think art is about aesthetics, but I believe it's more about emotion, about what it stirs within you." John, accustomed to conversations about profits and investments, was intrigued. "I agree," he replied, "though it seems most here are more interested in the prices of the pieces than in what they represent." She laughed, a sound like an unexpected melody. "Exactly. That's why I'm over here, away from the crowd. I'm not very good at gala conversations." "Neither am I," he admitted, extending his hand. "John." "Amber." And so it began. Their conversation flowed with surprising naturalness, a rare occurrence in John's world. Amber was intelligent, passionate, and utterly oblivious to his identity. While others scrambled to impress him with their connections or status, she spoke of her desire to help underprivileged communities and open a community school. She had no idea he was John Murray, the tycoon. To her, he was just a nice man with whom she'd found an unexpected connection. Over the next few months they met frequently. John, captivated by her authenticity, kept his financial identity a secret. He wanted to be loved for who he was, not what he had. Amber, for her part, seemed increasingly enchanted by him, and they began to imagine a future together. But there was a problem: her parents. John began hearing rumors. Mutual friends mentioned the Whitmores were in dire financial straits. For years, William had made disastrous investments, and Vivian, with her compulsion for ostentation, had accumulated exorbitant debts. Their mansion, an empty symbol of a vanished fortune, was, according to rumors, all they had left, and they were desperate to use Amber as a lifeline, ensuring she married a man rich enough to support the entire family. At first, John refused to believe it. Amber was so different. How could she come from such a toxic environment? However, as the rumors intensified, he realized he needed to know the truth. That's when the plan formed. By offering his services as a private chauffeur to the Whitmores, a service supposedly suggested by a family friend, John hoped to observe Amber's parents firsthand. He wanted to see how they treated someone they believed to be of a lower class. More importantly, he needed to protect Amber, to ensure she wasn't manipulated by those who were supposed to love her unconditionally. But the plan was risky. John knew that if exposed, he could lose Amber forever. She might interpret his actions as a betrayal, an invasion of her privacy. Still, he was willing to take the chance, believing the truth was paramount. That night, as he adjusted his driver's cap and stepped into the car for the first time, John felt a strange blend of anxiety and determination. He was about to enter the Whitmore's world, where every word, every glance, every gesture would be a clue to their true character. The day John adopted his disguise was a trial of patience and adaptability in a hostile environment. His first interaction with William and Vivian Whitmore instantly confirmed his worst fears. Arriving at the mansion in a freshly polished black sedan, wearing his custom-made chauffeur uniform, he was met with critical stares and calculated indifference. "You must be the new chauffeur," William said, appraising him head to toe like a second-hand item. "Be punctual, discreet, and don't ask questions. Is that clear?" "Yes, sir," John replied, purposely lowering his gaze, even as a lump formed in his throat. William's tone was an uncomfortable reminder of the years John had actually worked as a delivery driver, saving every penny to build his company. He hated being underestimated, but he knew at that moment that was exactly what the Whitmores needed to believe. Vivian appeared next, slowly descending the main staircase as if performing. She wore a bright red dress, ostentatious for a simple stroll, which seemed deliberate. She regarded John with faint disdain, as if tolerating something distasteful. "I hope you understand we operate by high standards," she said, gesturing dramatically. "If you're incompetent, we won't hesitate to replace you. Drivers are disposable after all." John kept his face expressionless, merely nodding. Inside, his anger seethed. Vivian had uttered that without hesitation, as if it were a universal truth. He'd met many such people, individuals who believed money or status defined human worth. But hearing it now, knowing she was Amber's mother, made it all the more revolting. His first journey undercover was to drive the Whitmores to a high society luncheon. In the back seat, the couple chatted, oblivious to John's presence, as if he were an inanimate object. This attitude was useful for his plan, but a constant affront to his self-control. "The situation is becoming untenable," William said irritably, running fingers through his gray hair. "Creditors are calling the mansion directly now. Imagine the embarrassment." "We need to be strategic," Vivian replied with a calculating tone. "Amber is already completely smitten with John. All we need is for him to propose. After that, we'll be safe. He's more than capable of supporting us, even with our circumstances." John's blood ran cold. There it was. Undisguised confirmation of his deepest fear. It wasn't just difficult or controlling parents. William and Vivian were using Amber as a pawn in their financial survival scheme. It was clear they didn't see their daughter as a person, but as a solution to their problems. Amber, however, seemed unaware. In all their conversations, John had found no indication she knew the seriousness of her family's situation. He knew she was intelligent, but the Whitmores were masters of deception, and Amber, with her genuine generous nature, had perhaps never recognized how much her parents manipulated circumstances. After dropping them at the restaurant, John parked and sat behind the wheel, reflecting. Every minute under this disguise felt like a trial by fire. He knew he had to keep going, but with each new fragment of truth, the weight of his disappointment grew. Later, back at the mansion, while waiting to take the Whitmores back to the city, John witnessed another telling scene. Vivian, wine glass in hand, was in the garden scolding a maid who had dropped a tray. "I told you to be more careful," Vivian exclaimed, face contorted with frustration. "Do you think we work hard to hire incompetent people like you?" The woman, clearly intimidated, lowered her head and apologized, but John saw the shame in her eyes. He knew what it was like to be treated that way, as if your worth was measured only by what you could offer. He longed to intervene but couldn't break cover. When the Whitmores finally appeared for their next appointment, Vivian continued to complain, now directing her frustrations at the driver. "I hope you can drive more skillfully than that waitress can carry trays," she said, getting into the car without even looking at John. He nodded again, fighting the urge to confront her. He increasingly saw that these people had no limits to their arrogance. Everything revolved around power, control, and appearance. It was obvious Vivian and William were willing to crush anyone they considered inferior, even their own daughter if necessary. That evening, as he parked the car back at the mansion and watched the Whitmores walk in without so much as a goodbye, John sat for a few minutes processing everything. He thought of Amber, so full of life, so different from her parents. How could she have grown up in that environment and still be so good? Perhaps that was precisely why they saw her as a tool. She was their opposite, and therefore perfect for attracting someone like John. He knew he had to continue. He needed to gather more information before deciding how to reveal the truth. But one thing was certain. The Whitmores weren't just manipulative. They were dangerous to Amber, and he wouldn't allow the woman he loved to be used like that. The air inside the black sedan was thick with tension. Every word William and Vivian Whitmore exchanged seemed sharper, more revealing. John Murray, still firm in his chauffeur disguise, felt that each minute in that car brought him closer to the truth, yet also plunged him deeper into a pit of deception and moral dilemmas. It was a particularly dark night. The approaching storm had begun to rumble in the skies as John drove the Whitmores to a gala dinner. William, predictably, was complaining. "These roads are getting worse and worse. It's impossible that we pay such high taxes to deal with these potholes," he grumbled, crossing his arms and glaring at John in the rearview mirror as if he were to blame. Vivian replied sarcastically, rolling her eyes. "Those drivers don't even vote, William. Don't expect them to understand how the system works." John suppressed the urge to respond, maintaining his stoic expression. It was a game he knew he had to play to the very end. However, their casually dismissive way of speaking about others was starting to weigh heavily on him. In the back seat, William changed the subject, and that's when complications escalated. He pulled an envelope from his inner jacket pocket, opening it to reveal a set of documents. John could glimpse from the rearview mirror that they related to property. He feigned disinterest but kept his ears open. "This is all we have left," William said, his voice laced with frustration. "If we can't secure this marriage, we'll lose even the cottage. It's unbearable to think it's come to this." Vivian, however, sounded more resigned. "Then we'll do whatever it takes. Amber is almost there. She's completely enchanted by John. Have you seen how she talks about him? It's only a matter of time before he proposes." "And if he doesn't?" William retorted, frowning. "If he finds out about our situation before then?" Vivian let out an impatient sigh. "He won't. Amber has no idea we're in this mess. And she certainly isn't going to tell him something she doesn't know. As long as he believes we're a respectable family, he'll feel obliged to protect her, and in the end to protect us too." These words were like a punch to John's gut. What he'd heard so far was bad enough, but this confirmed something even worse. The Whitmores weren't just manipulating their daughter. They were willing to use her as bait to ensure their own survival. They were playing a game that John knew was dangerously close to destroying Amber's trust in him if she discovered his espionage plan. Later that evening, while waiting outside the gala, John overheard a snippet of conversation between William and another guest that reinforced his suspicion. He had strategically parked his car close to the entrance, and with the windows open, he could hear parts of their discussion. "So you really think this wedding is going to happen?" the man asked with a slightly mocking tone. "I'm not convinced." "I'm certain of it," William replied. John is an intelligent man, but he's a man of principle, and men like that are easy to manipulate. They always think they can save the world, that they can rescue those they love. Amber will be our bridge to a secure future. He would never stop looking after her, and by extension us. "It's a risky strategy," the other man commented with a laugh. "But considering your situation, I don't think you have much to lose." John gripped the steering wheel so hard his knuckles turned white. He didn't know which was worse, William's blatant cynicism or the fact that a stranger was validating his approach. The feeling of being watched like a pawn in a game he didn't even know he was playing disgusted him. However, he knew he couldn't react. Not yet. That night, driving the Whitmores back to the mansion, John couldn't stop his mind from racing with doubts. He loved Amber, that much was certain. But what would he do if she knew all this? How would she react to learning her own parents were willing to use her this way? And more importantly, How would she react to discovering he had gone undercover to expose this truth? The tension inside the car seemed palpable. But ironically, the Whitmores were completely oblivious to John's inner turmoil. Vivian reclined in the back seat, exhausted after an evening of empty conversation and forced compliments. William, meanwhile, checked his phone, frowning at each message he received. "These investors are becoming unbearable," he muttered. "If only John would be more public about his plans. We could use that to our advantage." Vivian sighed. "Give it time, darling. He's still at the beginning of his relationship with Amber. Soon everything will become clearer. We'll get what we need." Back at the mansion, John helped Vivian out of the car while William muttered something about needing a stiff drink before bed. When he was finally alone in the car, John allowed himself a deep breath. Every day the situation became more complex. He knew he was heading for an inevitable confrontation. The question was when and how. As he watched the mansion's lights gradually fade, John made a silent promise. No matter what happened, he would protect Amber. But to do that, he would need to be careful and patient. The Whitmores were masters of the game they played. But John had something they didn't: integrity, and he was willing to use it as a weapon to turn the tables. The Whitmore mansion was cloaked in an eerie silence that morning. The shy sun filtered through the huge windows, but the atmosphere remained tense. John Murray knew the day would be decisive. He felt the weight of responsibility growing, but he no longer had time for hesitation. Something in Vivian's furtive glances and William's escalating anxiety over the past few days warned him they were ready to make their final move. John arrived at the mansion early as usual, but this time with a clear plan. He needed concrete evidence of the Whitmores' true intentions. Whispered words in the car wouldn't suffice. He needed something irrefutable. As he waited in the driveway, John observed the house's routine. Vivian, always a picture of perfection, was giving orders to the staff. William was secluded in his study, but John had seen him bring in a pile of confidential papers the night before. The opportunity arose when William stepped out to take a call in the garden, leaving his office unlocked. John, heart-pounding, swiftly entered and began to search the desk. He found unfinished contracts, debt records, and most alarmingly, correspondence between William and a creditor threatening to seize the mansion within weeks. But what truly caught his eye was a folder bearing Amber's name. Inside were letters written by William, intended for John but never sent. In them, William painted a picture of desperation, begging for financial help and using Amber as an emotional bargaining chip. "You love my daughter," John read from one of the letters. "And as a father, all I want is to ensure she has a safe and comfortable life. But to do that, we need your help." John felt his stomach churn. He knew William was manipulating Amber, but seeing how far he was willing to go, even writing these letters, begging like a mendicant disguised as a concerned father, was the final straw. Later that day, John drove the Whitmores to a lunch with investors. The tension was palpable. Vivian, wearing an extravagant necklace he knew was likely bought on credit, spoke excitedly about the family's future. "With these new investments, we'll have the resources to revitalize the country house," she said, glancing at William. William offered a brief smile, but John could see the worry hidden in his eyes. They were approaching an abyss and he knew it. "Joe," Vivian said abruptly, using the false name John had given her as a driver. "Please be careful when you pick us up later. We need to be impeccable for the gala dinner. We don't want Amber to be ashamed of anything." John felt a wave of anger surge, but he maintained his composure. "Yes, ma'am," he replied calmly, knowing every second brought him closer to the inevitable explosion. It was on the drive back to the mansion later that afternoon that the confrontation finally erupted. The rain was beginning to fall again, and the rhythmic sound of drops against the car roof seemed to echo the growing unease in the air. William, apparently unable to contain his anxiety, began to speak. "We need to ensure John proposes as soon as possible," he said bluntly. "Amber is already involved, but time is against us. If he finds out about our debts before then, we'll be ruined." Vivian sighed. "Yes, but we have to be careful. We can't appear desperate." John, unable to hear another word, felt adrenaline take over. He looked into the rearview mirror and met William's eyes. "Interesting to hear, Mr. Whitmore," he said calmly. but his voice carried an unmistakable firmness. The silence in the car was instantaneous. Vivian and William exchanged alarmed glances. "What do you mean?" William asked, trying to keep his composure, but his voice was louder than usual. John parked the car in the driveway and turned off the engine. He slowly turned to face them, taking off his chauffeur's cap. "I mean, perhaps you should know who's really driving this car." Vivian turned pale. William, conversely, seemed to freeze, unable to process what was happening. "I'm John Murray," he stated, his voice as sharp as steel. "And yes, I came here to find out the truth because, contrary to what you think, I don't make decisions blindly. And now I know exactly what kind of people you are." Tension exploded like lightning inside the car. Vivian tried to regain her composure, but her words came out shaky. We were just trying to protect our family." "Protect?" John interrupted, his voice rising for the first time. "You were using your own daughter as a bargaining chip. That's not protection. It's selfishness, and it's unforgivable." William tried to defend himself, but John held up a hand. "I don't want to hear anymore. You took advantage of Amber's kindness, of her trust, and worst of all, she has no idea what you're doing." The rain now fell in full force, and the sounds of thunder seemed to punctuate the confrontation. Vivian, finally unable to maintain her facade, began to cry. "Please don't tell her," she begged. "Amber wouldn't understand. And she'd never forgive us." John was silent for a long moment. Finally, he said, "Amber deserves to know the truth, and she will. But not from you." Without another word, he got out of the car and walked into the mansion, leaving the Whitmores behind in the rain and the chaos they had created. The rain fell like a liquid curtain over the Whitmore mansion, but inside its imposing walls, an even greater storm was about to break. John Murray strode through the entrance hall with firm steps, his wet shoes marking the spotless marble floor. Unwavering determination shone in his eyes. There was no longer room for doubt or hesitation. Amber was in the main hall, engrossed in a book in an armchair by the fireplace. The fire's warmth starkly contrasted with the chill John felt inside. She smiled when she saw him enter, but her smile faded as she noticed the grave expression on his face. "John?" she asked, rising. "What happened? Are you all right?" Before John could answer, William and Vivian rushed through the front door, still visibly shaken. Vivian attempted a carefree smile, but her effort was miserably transparent. William, meanwhile, looked on the verge of exploding, yet maintained a facade of control. "Amber," Vivian began, completely ignoring John. "Darling, we need to talk to you about something important." Amber frowned, confused. "What's going on?" John held up a hand, interrupting Vivian before she could say another word. His voice was firm, yet charged with emotion. "No, they won't tell you." "I will." Amber looked from one to the other, her confusion deepening. "Can someone please explain what's happening?" John took a deep breath. "Amber, there's something you need to know about your parents and about me." He hesitated, feeling the weight of the words about to be spoken. "I'm not who you think I am. I'm not just John Murray, the man you're dating. For the last few weeks, I've been disguised as your family's chauffeur to understand what's truly going on here." Amber's eyes widened, disbelief etched across her face. "You what? You disguised yourself? Why?" Before John could answer, William exploded. "He did it because he doesn't trust us. He's trying to paint us as villains when all we did was protect you." John turned to him, his anger finally boiling over. "Protect? You were using your own daughter as a bargaining chip, manipulating her, lying to her. That's not protection. That's betrayal." Amber raised her hand, her voice trembling. "Enough. Can someone please explain what you're talking about?" John looked into her eyes, his heart aching. "Amber, your parents are facing massive debts. They're about to lose everything, and they were banking on our relationship as their solution. They wanted me to save them financially, using you as the bridge to do so." The silence that followed was almost unbearable. Amber looked at her parents, who avoided her gaze, unable to deny it. Her expression shifted from confusion to pain, then to something John could only describe as devastation. "Is it true?" she asked, her voice low, almost a whisper. Vivian began to cry while William stared at the floor, unable to face her. "Amber, we We just wanted the best for you and for our family. Best for me. Amber repeated, incredulous. You were lying to me, using me? How can that be what's best for me? John stepped forward, trying to reach her. I know this is a lot to process, but I needed you to know the truth. I did it because I love you, Amber. I needed to protect you from them. Amber pulled away, tears beginning to stream down her face. Protect? You lied to me too, John. You disguised yourself, infiltrated my life without telling me. How is that any different from what they did? John felt the blow. He tried to speak, but the words seemed caught in his throat. Meanwhile, William began to plead. Amber, please, you have to understand. We did this out of desperation. We had no other choice. You always have a choice, she retorted, the pain in her voice turning to anger. But you chose to lie. You chose to use me. Vivian fell to her knees, clutching the hem of Amber's dress. We are your family, Amber. Please don't abandon us. We don't know what to do without you. Amber took a step back, her gaze now resolute. Family? A family that lies, manipulates, and uses its own members to save itself? That's not family. That's selfishness. John finally found his voice. Amber, I know what I did was wrong. I know I lied to you, but everything I did was to find out the truth and protect you. I love you and I don't want to lose you. She looked at him, pain and disappointment mixing in her eyes. I need time to think, John. I don't know who to trust right now. Everything feels like a lie. Silence filled the room again, heavy and suffocating. Amber took one last look at her parents, now defeated, and then at John before leaving the hall and heading for the stairs. John stood there, feeling the weight of his actions. He knew he loved her more than anything, but perhaps it was too late to make amends. The sun was setting over the Whitmore mansion, painting the sky with shades of orange and gold. Amber sat in her bedroom, looking out the window at the garden where she'd often played as a child. That place, once a refuge, now felt laden with complicated memories. The revelations of the past few days had shaken everything she thought she knew about her family, her relationship with John, and most importantly, about herself. She sighed and reached for her cell phone. Hesitant, she knew she couldn't avoid this conversation forever. John deserved an answer, a chance to explain, and perhaps a chance to start over. John was sitting on his balcony, gazing at the horizon when the sound of a car caught his attention. He stood, his heart quickening as he saw Amber emerge from the vehicle. A surge of hope and anxiety washed over him. She walked towards him, her eyes bright, but her expression serious. Amber, he said, trying to gauge her reaction. She smiled slightly. Hi, John. Can I come in? Of course, he replied, opening the door. Always. They sat in the living room and for a moment neither spoke. John, unable to contain his emotion, broke the silence first. Amber, I'm so sorry for everything. I know what I did was wrong, and I'll never forgive myself for lying to you, even if it was with good intentions. I love you and all I want is your happiness, even if that means giving us up. Amber looked at him, her eyes glistening with tears. But there was a softness in her expression that John hadn't expected. John, she began, her voice firm, you lied to me. You hid the truth and infiltrated my life without my knowledge. It hurt me deeply. He lowered his head, but she continued. But, she said, her voice now softer, you also showed me something no one else had the courage to. You opened my eyes to the reality of my family. And most importantly, you did it because you care about me. Even if what you did was wrong, it was done out of love, and that means something to me. John looked up, surprised. Do you really believe we can get past this? Amber smiled genuinely now. I believe that if we work together and are honest from now on, we can get through anything. He felt a wave of relief and joy. I promise, Amber. There will never be lies between us again. I want to build something real with you, something solid. She nodded, taking his hand. Me too. In the months that followed, William and Vivian Whitmore began to rebuild their lives. They sold unnecessary possessions and learned for the first time in decades to live simply. Their relationship with Amber remained complicated, but she had set clear boundaries, which they now respected. Surprisingly, John offered to help them manage their debts on one condition: absolute transparency about how the money would be used. William, though proud, accepted, grateful for the chance to start anew. A year later, John took Amber on a special trip to the town where he grew up. He wanted her to see the place that shaped him, a simple but meaningful place. As they walked through a quiet park at sunset, John stopped and held her hands. Amber, this past year has proven we can overcome anything. You're the most incredible woman I've ever met, and I don't want to spend another day of my life without you by my side. He knelt, taking a small velvet box from his pocket. When he opened it, a ring sparkled in the light of the setting sun. Amber Whitmore, will you marry me? She laughed, tears streaming down her face as she nodded frantically. Yes, John. Yes, 1,000 times yes. He stood, slipped the ring onto her finger, and pulled her into a tight embrace. As they kissed, the sound of children playing in the distance and the wind in the trees seemed to compose the perfect soundtrack for the moment. A few months later, they married in an intimate ceremony surrounded only by their closest friends and family. Amber walked down the aisle next to William, who for the first time seemed truly moved. Vivian also appeared more humble, clearly regretful, but grateful to have her daughter in her life. At the end of the ceremony, John and Amber shared a dance under the stars. Now, as husband and wife, they knew the road ahead wouldn't be perfect, but they were ready to face it together, with love and honesty as their foundations. And so they began a new chapter, not as perfect heroes, but as people who had learned to love and grow even in the face of adversity. Thank you for sharing this moment with us. Every story I tell is crafted with dedication and care, aiming to touch hearts. If this narrative resonated with you, please consider subscribing, so we can continue this journey of moving stories. Your support is essential for us to keep sharing these unique experiences. Cheers! And we'll see you in the next one.